Have you been in contact with these big multilateral organizations
Yeah,
very
of
much?
course, very much indirectly, because so they are not usually present in crisis. So lots of the country I've worked, of course, they are not precisely active.
Mm.
In few others, and mainly in Africa, yes, they are, if only as well because the program and the action they are pushing governments to take, following loans from the World Bank or the IMF, have a direct impact on the capacity of the governments to do things. Because basically the plan is lots of the time reduction of public spending, which of course means reduction of health services, education services, all social services, of course, and that's where we work, directly or indirectly.
I see.
So when they don't have the capacity to do the job, and we helping them to try to improve the services they provide, then of course that has a direct impact.
Right.
It has a direct economic impact as well, because this idea of the competitive advantage market, which is the model pushed by the IMF and the World Bank indirectly, which is focus on where you're supposed to have an advantage, which of course majority of poor countries is agriculture, export agriculture more precisely, or for some of them cheap employees.
Yeah.
We're thinking about Bangladesh and the clothes making business, or Cambodia. So them pushing for those kind of economical development has a huge impact on everything else. So on one way, lots of economic opportunity are lost because all the resources are focused on this so-called competitive advantage element. If you want to get any money in Ivory Coast to do anything else than growing cocoa, you won't have it.
Which is very convenient for the rest of the world.
Yeah, of course, that's one of the things. But it fragilizes the economy of those countries. And of course, for us, who are there to help the provision of, I call that social services in general. For me, that includes the health, the education, all social services. Of course, that doesn't usually result in very good elements for. I think I don't have the latest numbers, but a few years ago I remember that the health budget of the majority of African country was about a quarter of the budget for paying back the international loan interest, in example. And of course that's why services don't exist, basically.
By design.
Yeah. So we are frequently confronted to that because we have to work with government, and lots of the people in those governments, certainly on technical level, they want to do their job, they want to provide services to their people, but they don't have the resources to do that. They don't have the staff, they don't have the resources. For me, the health person I am means they don't have the drugs, they don't have the facilities. Your health staff will be paid $20 a month, kind of stuff. So of course it impacts on this delivery.
So the IMF and the World Bank are almost by definition incompatible with crisis management. And also
well, it's not that they're incompatible; it's they don't intervene in those type of what we call humanitarian crisis, but of course the capacity. I tend to define two type of crises. What I tend to call the normal emergencies, like every country has. Like in Australia, we have bushfires, floods. They're normal emergencies. Yes, they're emergency, but they are normal, and we've developed societies to deal with them. Yeah, we cry on television, and so on, but at the end we deal with them. It's part of our system. And then there is the big disaster catastrophe. The day we have an earthquake of amplitude 10 in Australia, we won't be able to deal with it, and external people will need to come. But the capacity of the government to answer and prepare and have their structure set up for those normal emergencies doesn't exist because they don't have the resources. And that is based on lots of restriction imposed by the model that the IMF, the World Bank has been pushing.
I mean, even food is. So I've heard the term food sovereignty thrown around, and I guess if you have the idea being if you have these competitive advantage products that undermine, people are growing those crops at the expense of
Food.
crops that would actually allow them to have their own food sovereignty, and then food aid as well, which would actually further prevent sometimes that food sovereignty, although there's different perspectives.
Yeah, food aid, there is several elements. Once more, there is what you could consider kind of local market failure, where indeed local market doesn't have the capacity or the investment to make sure there is food availability all over the year for everybody, because of course few groups in the societies never have any issue with having food. That's one of the elements. And there is the push. Take an example in Kenya, where I think 20% or more of the best land is used to cultivate flour for export, which may provide money for a certain group, but then the reality is the capacity of the country to provide or produce enough food doesn't exist, so they become depending of the market. But the reality is those countries do not control the cost and the price of their so-called competitive advantage product. They fix the price. They have absolutely no power whatsoever to do that. So they are totally dependent of external companies, and there is very few of them at the end.
Is that policy associated with the IMF and the World Bank?
No, not well. Yes, because you push a country to produce something which it de facto doesn't have any control on. They can't control how much they are going to sell their crop, which means from one year to another they may lose 50% of their income because the price of this item has crashed. And if the price increase, usually they are not the one beneficiating from the increase of price. I think the example of coffee recently is a very good example, because so-called the price on the world market has increased a lot. We always hear we're going to pay more for our coffee, but the reality is the producers haven't seen any increase on the price they are paid for their crop. So they are not the one beneficiating. And the reality, I think the coffee is controlled by 3 or 4 companies in the world. The cereals are controlled by 3 or 4 companies in the world. They're the one having the power. So your producer locally, the producer of flour in Kenya, doesn't control how much his flours are going to be paid to him at all.
How could that change? Is there a way for that to change?
Yes, on some ways. First of all, there is an issue of sovereignty, and for some element, I think every country should be sovereign on those elements, and I think feeding their population is one of them. So if
So broader than just the prices of flour or
there's a time where you have to consider that I need to produce this quantity of food for my population where I have a certain control, and that should be priority of governments. But of course, once more, they don't have the power to do so. Majority of the poor country governments. They are totally dependent of factors they don't control. And the more we push on those type of production, the more or the less control they have. I think we can take an example which is an historical example, but I think it's relevant. South Korea, after the Korea War, was extremely poor. Country was smashed to pieces. The only competitive advantage they had was very cheap workers. And there was a push by the IMF, World Bank at the time, for them to become kind of what China was going to become a bit later, a cheap workshop producing basic stuff, clothes, and I think that was clothes a lot at the time. And there was a very clear political decision by the Korean government to not accept that, go for sovereign industrial development, go for high-tech, high-value productions. The result is they didn't get any loan by the World Bank and the IMF. So they did struggle to do it, but Japan invested a lot, and the result is now some of the biggest industrial conglomerates are South Korean. South Korea is not a poor country anymore, while majority of the country that have adopted the hardline economical model pushed by international institutions. At the end, it's not only the World Bank and the IMF. You could say the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank have followed a bit the same model. All the countries that have applied all the recipe pushed to them by those institutions are still poor and developed countries. They are not the ones that have beneficiated.
So are there other sanctions that, for example, South Korea faced?
No, they were not sanctioned.
Or other
they were just
political ramifications or military.
No, I think at the time maybe South Korea on additional to a policy of the government of the time, and maybe some in the society, had the advantage that being on the front line of the anti-communist things, that they could beneficiate from other element, positive elements that at the end, even without loan from the big international institution, they did manage.
So they had strategic bargaining power because of their position.
Because of North Korea, China,
because America could not afford to let them.
The American presence. But at the end, the main investor in Korea, as much as I know, was Japan.
Oh. Okay. And I've read that the inter-Asia trade was quite strong, at the time that many of these countries were developing. Which was very helpful.
Yeah, but on some level, a certain level of protectionism is necessary when you're a poor country.
Yeah.
And that, of course, does not exist. And we all know an example that at the end, the poor countries, developing countries markets are in reality far more open than lots of the developed country markets.
Yeah, by these conditions of the IMF and the World
Bank. Not only that, but by their poverty, their total dependence of the outside, the fact they can't resist and put any barrier.
For example, Somalia having all the fishing around the coast.
These, but as well some of the local stock market, as little as they are far more de facto open to foreign investments when there is some. Their company are far more under the control of external companies, so they're far less independent economically than the richest country would be. So free market, even if they are not really free, but always a bit skeptical on everything being free market. But there may be some advantage when you've reached a certain development and economical power. It's clear that for poor countries that has been a very negative element. So this policy that has been pushed, and particularly since the collapse of the USSR, has not been good for the developing countries. Per capita, Africa has not moved. In fact, has regressed on many levels.